Welcome to the Real Estate Podcast with Robert Ikard. Today I have one of the best guests I can possibly imagine, my friend, my mentor, and frankly, one of the people in the world I look up to the most. And it's the Honorable Rudy S. Apodaca.
Thank you, Robert, for that.
Yes, I've known him since I was born. He's been a family friend. And we're not going to be pure real estate today. We'll talk a little bit about real estate, but we have a lot more to talk about. And I'm so privileged to have Judge Apodaca as my guest today. We're in Cedar Park, Texas. So this is Cedar Park. For those of you that don't know, it is in Texas, Central Texas, on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. So we live in this lovely golf course community. He does. I'm visiting him. And so let me tell you all a little bit about Judge Apodaca. First of all, thank you, Judge, for joining us today.
Thank you, Robert, for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. Judge Apodaca is a lawyer and former jurist, having served on the New Mexico Court of Appeals. He was chief judge of the Court of Appeals in New Mexico. And they hear appellate cases. So there's a trial level. And if the people one of the sides don't like the way the trial ended up, they appeal it. And they go to his court for, hopefully for them, whosever side it is, a different result than what the trial. And a lot of times that has to do, and I'll let the judge go into it more.
You might add both criminal and civil cases.
Civil and criminal. And a lot of times they're not trying to necessarily, or at all, trying to push a jury and the jury's verdict aside if it was a jury trial. What they're trying to say is, did everything comply legally? Were all the ducks in a row legally on the rules of evidence, the law? And so he took office as judge in 1987. He served in that position for almost 14 years, and he is presently performing mediation and arbitration services in Central Texas, officing in the Austin metropolitan area. He's licensed to practice law in Texas and New Mexico. And he is bilingual in English and Spanish. He was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, as was I.
Good place to start off.
Yes, the best food ever, also, and beautiful views. To Mexican American parents, Raimundo Apodaca and Elisa Apodaca. He was raised a Catholic in New Mexico, where he attended parochial and public schools, and he graduated from Las Cruces High School. He has been married to Nancy Mitchum, who's a native of Arkansas, for 54 years, and together they have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. And so he also served in the Army. He did communication and electronics. He has a bio that is unbelievable, but I'm just hitting some highlights here. But you can go to a website called Everypedia. Yes.
Yeah, actually, my website has a link to it.
Yeah, exactly. And what is your website, Judge?
It's very easy, rudyapodaca.com.
There we go. Okay. And he graduated with honors from New Mexico State University, with a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. I could never do that. So Judge, I think, is a genius, but that's just I'm being. But it's so you could say I'm being biased, but on the other hand,
and flattering,
but on the other hand, I'm not making this up. He went to Georgetown University Law Center, and he received his Juris Doctorate degree, and then he began practicing law in New Mexico in 1964. One thing I did read further on in your bio, Judge, is you were the only Hispanic at the Georgetown Law School.
In my class, yes. We had a class of about 160 students, and I was the only Hispanic, yes.
And were there any African Americans?
There were none in my class.
Were there any women?
2.
Okay, so the days
Which differs quite a bit. About 51% of the enrollment in law schools today, university, is women.
Oh yeah. Oh no. I know it's changed dramatically, but I'm just saying he was a groundbreaker, and having a mathematics degree, I'm sure impressed them a lot at Georgetown University in order for him to get into that school, and he also wanted to go. Judge, I'm going to go a little bit, but then I want you to talk a little bit. You wanted to be in Georgetown, specifically, in the D.C. area.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
can you tell us a little bit about what you were thinking?
Well, you got to remember that I was graduating from college in 1961, in June of 1961, a long time ago. And I had, of course, an option to apply for admission at the University of New Mexico Law School. But I had gone to school there, and I had been in New Mexico. I wanted to have an experience outside the state. And at that time, I was somewhat interested in politics, and I thought that being in the D.C. area would be good for me, a good experience for me to be, in case I ever did go into politics.
Yes.
And I knew that Georgetown was recognized to be a good law school.
Yes.
One of the... At that time, I don't know if it was one of the top law schools, but certainly today it is.
I think, is it a Catholic school? I think it is. Right?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Catholic University.
Okay, that's what I thought. I probably should know all these things, and I guess I did, but But anyway, thank you for that. Judge Apodaca was general counsel and town attorney for the city of Mesilla, for the school board of Gadsden Independent School District, special assistant attorney general for the state of New Mexico. Represented Citizens Bank of Las Cruces as general counsel for 9 years, served on the board of directors for that bank for 11 years. He was appointed by the governor of New Mexico as a regent to serve on the board of regents of his alma mater, New Mexico State University, where he served for 8 years and 2 years as board president. So aside from having authored 1,127 opinions, he has also written many articles, and he has 4 books. And we want to talk about your books. So we'll talk about those in a little bit. But I do want to go through a couple of more things. So, Judge, your parents, let's talk about a little bit about your parents. And your dad was, he became more of a, well, you tell me a little bit about your parents.
Well, I consider myself having had humble beginnings in Las Cruces. I was born in 1939. Shortly after I was born, a few years afterwards, my dad was drafted into the Army. Although he had 5 children. I've got four siblings at the time. And he worked as a clerk at J.C. Penney for what I recall back then in the late 40s and the early 50s, 60 cents an hour.
Okay.
And but he worked there for some 20-some years.
Okay.
Both my mother and dad had to go to work soon for the families because of needing income.
Yes.
So they never finished high school. So of the 5 children, 3 of them are the 3 boys. We all graduated from college. So that was quite a change from my mom and dad's time. So they were very proud of their family. Juliet and Priscilla, my 2 sisters, never went to college, but they finished high school and they had jobs. And so my parents were very proud of their family. So I'm very, my mom and dad are both passed away, of course. My dad in 1998, my mother in 2002. But I have fond memories of growing up with them and what they could do for us. There was always food on the table. I remember that.
And they instilled quite an ethic in you children, somehow, some way, right?
Yes, I feel that implicit in their behavior, the way they encouraged us in school, I felt that I owed them a lot. And the fact that I decided to go on to college and get a college degree, go on to get a law degree, and I attribute that to their support and encouragement and their work ethic.
Yes.
Because they were hard workers. My mother worked hard raising us, and my dad worked hard for us.
Yes.
In different jobs. So I
Well-
learned a lot from them implicitly in that regard.
And not only were you the chief judge of the Court of Appeals, your brother, Jerry, tell the people what he went on to become.
He went on to become governor. Jerry is 5 years, he passed away 2 months ago. Jerry was 5 years older than I was, and I like to think that I helped him a lot get elected. There were a lot of supporters that he had that did. Your dad being one of them, your parents.
Yes.
But anyway, Jerry succeeded in politics. He was in the state senate for about 3 or 4 years, and then he decided to run for governor. And he ran in a field of 5 Democratic candidates in the Democratic primary back in '75, in '74 really, because he was governor from '75 to '78 for 4 years. But he ran in the field of 5 Democratic candidates. He was one of 5, and he won. And then he only won the general election against a Republican by about 3,000 votes.
Wow. Well, and to think about it, we come from Las Cruces, which isn't exactly what I would call the power center of New Mexico. And to do that, it's kind of I don't know. Well, do you understand what I'm getting at?
You don't consider it a power center, do you? I mean,
No, I said it. I do not consider it.
That's correct.
No, the opposite.
No.
We are not.
Well, Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Santa Fe being the state capital and Albuquerque being the largest city, being in the northern part of the state. Las Cruces is kind of third rate in that regard.
Yes.
Although you and I consider it God's country down there.
Yes.
A lot of people do not, but Las Cruces right now, and at that time, probably was the second largest city in the state.
Right.
Albuquerque being the largest, and Las Cruces following. So Las Cruces, even though it's been on a smaller scale, still it's been the second largest city in the state.
Right. And for you all to go on, and your brother is governor, and you as chief judge.
For being from that area,
Yes.
to get electable in the Albuquerque area, where they know mostly candidates are resident from Bernalillo County or Santa Fe County.
Exactly.
That is. It's kind of it's quite a victory.
Yes, that's what I was driving at. And so, but Las Cruces, like you say, it is the second biggest city in New Mexico, and we do have New Mexico State University, and we have a lot going on. Let me go through, and I talked about you being the only Hispanic in your class. I'm sure you didn't get treated I don't know. Were you treated differently?
No, I never felt I did at the time.
I mean,
although in my books and my novels, I do relate a lot of racial prejudice incidences, of racism that I've experienced in my life. But I can't say that I was treated differently in Georgetown. Either way, I did go there at a time when affirmative action was in place, and so I wasn't accepted because I was Hispanic.
You mean it was not in place?
It was not in place
back
then.
Right.
I'm saying. So that because of that, I'm saying either way, I was not treated differently.
Right. And I mean, I don't know how many. I know few people. I mean, I'm a lawyer too, that had a mathematics degree in my law school class. I mean, that's quite a deal. You have a great mind, and as on a personal note, Judge has been my friend, my lawyer, my mentor, and it's just, and for my whole family.
We go back a long time, don't we?
Oh, we do, and you've always given the best advice, and you still do.
Thank you.
Yes, and I mean it goes on. Some of the awards you've won. It really goes on.
I'd rather you bypass that.
Okay, we're going to bypass it, but I do want people to look into it, and
They can read about.
Yeah, it's a lot,
website,
but there's
a website.
But you do play chess.
That's one of my hobbies. Yeah.
You do needlepoint, calligraphy.
Some of that is past in the past.
And coin collections. And okay, you've written a lot of articles. I mean, they've been published in the Austin American-Statesman, the Houston Chronicle. Okay.
The San Antonio Express News.
Yes, I saw that too. So you're a prolific publisher of articles, and there's a lot of them. I want to talk about a couple.
I would say writer. I'm a writer.
Right. Yeah, you're not a publisher.
I didn't publish it.
But my bad.
The newspapers published it.
Yeah, my bad.
But I wrote a lot of commentary.
That's what I meant to say. But just a couple of them caught my eye, Judge. It goes on and on. But
and by the way, that bio that you're reading from, they can see it on my website. So if they want anything specific, they can even read those commentaries on my website.
Okay, good.
But if you want,
I just wanted to touch on a couple
of
things.
Topics, yeah.
A lot of articles, but I saw addressing mental health key in helping Austin's homeless. What was that article about, Judge?
Well, essentially, I think the article you're referring to is one in which I indicate that the homelessness experience that we have in our country in general, and in Austin in particular, is because of mental illness.
Yes.
You have to recall what I did in the article back in the 70s and the 60s. The courts declared insane asylums and mental institutions is violating the law and keeping people from being at liberty. And at that time, because of those rulings in Jackson, in the Supreme Court ruling, many of these mentally ill people were let out of the mental institutions.
Basically onto the streets in many cases.
And so what inevitably the consequence was that they ended up in the streets.
Yes.
So there they were, and they perpetuated the problem. They gave birth to others, and others followed in suit. So a lot of the homeless people that we have, not just in Austin but elsewhere, are people that are mentally ill.
Yes.
And that's why law enforcement officers, and that's why the medical profession, they have to realize that and deal with it accordingly. So the article was on that. In addition to that article, I was asked by some professors at New Mexico State University to be a part of a training course for law enforcement throughout the country. And they created videos, and they had as speakers psychiatrists, psychologists, law enforcement people, me as judge. And I went ahead and lectured on mental illness in the law. And it was recorded and videotaped. And the videotape of that is still available on YouTube.
Okay.
It was placed on YouTube by the law enforcement people in New Mexico, and it's there. It's about an hour long, and I speak there about mental illness in the law.
Well, let me ask you a question, Judge, that I have on my mind. I know, I don't know if it was under Reagan. I think he closed a lot of the mental hospitals, or I can't put I'm not an expert on the topic, but
I'm not so sure it was a presidential act. I think the courts are the ones that essentially said that a lot of people behind bars in mental asylums, mental hospitals, didn't belong there. That they need to have their freedom.
Well, and it's my opinion. A lot of people in jail right now, it's mostly mental.
Yes, of course. That's true.
It's mostly mental.
So it is a widespread problem.
But Judge, should and I know we're going to move on, but
I do refer.
It's a big problem in this country.
I do refer to that video if somebody wants to know, because I speak about it for about an hour on the video.
Do you think we need more mental institutions?
No,
what do you think some of the key, just one or two of the key solutions is?
I think that we need more awareness from the public about the problem that mental illness does pose for us in the world. And we also have to have education so that the stigma of mental illness is taken away. In other words, there's still a stigma. People do not like to think that a member of their family is mentally ill.
Right.
That type of thing. So the stigma has to be taken away. I don't know that we ever will succeed in doing that, but we should try. And then, of course, we need to make sure that the people that need care and treatment are treated.
Right.
And for that reason, to go back to your question, no, I don't think the answer is more mental institutions, because that's what we did away from. We try to get away from that.
So you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with it.
Okay.
I think that sometimes we try to
warehouse them.
We try to take care of the problem, and we overdo it.
kind of like put it out of sight, out of mind, and you don't think that that's a good...
Exactly.
Okay, that's a nice Christian attitude too, by the way.
That was the mode of thinking of the past, and
okay,
we've got to move on with the times and change our way of thinking.
Right.
That's why I'm a Democrat, and that's why I'm progressive, because I think that the laws and our policies must change with time.
Right. Sorry, Judge, I'm going into another article. The elusiveness of happiness. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that? That caught my eye.
Well, I guess the thing to say about these topics that I wrote about many things about the law, aspects of the law.
Right.
But I also delved in other topics.
Right.
For example, elusiveness of happiness. Well, I think, in my books, I speak of it through characters. But I think that happiness is something in the world. First of all, life is a struggle. Life is not easy. And given that, because it's not easy, we were God-given emotions and feelings that make life hard. And the sooner we realize that in life, the better off we'll be, because then we'll delve and deal with it and confront it as what it is. People try to be happy, and
like all the time.
Right. And you can't, first of all, be 100% happy all of the time. So that's what I mean by the elusiveness. And in the book, for example, one of the characters says that it's practically non-existent at sometimes.
Exactly.
At some point in time, it's non-existent. And if people look back at their lives, they reflect and wonder whether they were happy, whether they led happy lives. And they have a hard time answering that question. And for example, I read Rabbi Harold Kushner, for example, who's written several books on behavior and people and society. He says that when he's gone to sick beds, people dying from sickness, cancer, whatever, it's not so much that they're afraid of dying as they are afraid of not having been significant in life, not having led a life that was productive. That's what they're wondering, did I live a good, full life? And so they're not afraid of the death, they're afraid of not having lived, so to speak.
Right.
So we're talking about, philosophically about...
No, I like it. I like it though, Judge.
But that's what that article deals
with.
Well,
the thing is, Judge, I think even depression, people are like, oh, you can never be sad. You can... depression is a complicated word. But I think being sad and down is...
It's part of life.
I think it's even more part of life than being elated and happy.
Exactly.
But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well...
It can be that way.
I think a person's successful if he can get a little bit of both.
Right.
In other words, less of the sadness and negative stuff of life and more of the positive.
Well, it's my understanding President Lincoln was very depressed. Pretty much most of his life.
Yes, that's true. And I don't know whether he was clinically depressed, but he did suffer from depression. Depression is one of the, when we talk about mental illness, depression is a very major part of that.
Right.
Now, a lot of us don't suffer from clinical depression, which means that it's more deep-rooted and it's in a different level. But we have our Blue Mondays. And
exactly.
In other words, and it's good that we do have them, because when we have our happy moments, we can appreciate them more.
Yes. So, and I do think that the constant pursuit of being constantly jacked up happy is ridiculous.
I think it's a lost goal. I don't think that should be our goal.
No, but it almost seems like society in certain ways encourages that.
But now if you tell me what is it we should practice more, and it's hard to do this, but I think there's not enough goodness in the world.
And kindness.
Kindness. Let's not talk about religion. Let's not talk about Christianity or Judaism, whatever. Let's just talk about humanness and humanity. And for example, one of the things that one of the characters in my new book talks about when he talks about the 83-year-old friend that he made in this little town of San Miguel when he moved there with his parents. He talks about the goodness in that man. And there's very little goodness in the world. All of us have good in us. But to be when you can say about somebody, he was a good person.
Right.
That is saying a lot.
It is.
That means a lot. Now, it doesn't mean that in every good person there's not badness, because
exactly.
we're not perfect. So not being perfect, we're going to have a little bit of bad in us.
Well,
all of us are going to sin. All of us are not going to behave as a good person should in this life.
Right.
But I feel that instead of having to have happiness as a goal, I think if we should have a goal of being a good person.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And here's the other thing, Judge, what I've encountered in my life is I've encountered a lot of things too as well. Not like you, but the thing is you get what you give back. You get what you give. In other words, when you have an encounter with somebody, you can be grumpy, you can be real businesslike, you can be in a rush. But a lot of times, like, I'll see people at the convenience store anywhere, and I'll make little jokes. And they smile and they light up. They want that. People don't want you to just pass them with a sour face. People respond. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes,
Jeff?
yes, and I agree with what you said. As long as we don't mistake that when people face tragedies in their families or face some negative aspect of life, some terrible experience, for people to feel that they must have done something wrong to deserve that type of experience.
Right.
That is not true, because I've known a lot of people who have not deserved the misfortune that life has dealt them.
Absolutely.
And so some of us are luckier than others. Some of us are more fortunate than others in that respect. And my wife and I, Nancy and I, feel blessed that in our age, I just turned 84 last week.
Happy birthday, Judge.
Well, thank you. Thank you. But and I don't feel like I'm 84, and I don't feel like, I hope I don't look like I'm 84, but be that as it may, it's just important to do as much good as you can in this world and to enjoy life.
Right.
And the closer you get to your last day on earth, which a person as you age, you do get closer to it, the more you reflect on how appreciative you are having a good quality of life. So I wake up every day thanking God that He's given me another day.
Well, let me ask you this, Judge, and I appreciate that. We have a lot of young people that listen to podcasts. That's the largest demographic, okay?
Yes, I'm sure I've heard that.
And I want to talk about your books, okay? But it's not the only demographic. It's all ages, but it's a large demographic that listen to podcasts. There's few people I know on the planet, and I'm so fortunate to have you as our guest. But there's few people I know on the planet that I would ask this question to, because and here's my question, and it may be a little bit rambling, but so be it. But I'm going to try to keep it succinct, because you are a judge, and you don't like people wasting your time. No,
I don't want to intimidate you.
No. My question is, for young people, they see you, they're going to see this podcast, they see the successes you've achieved in life. Say you're a 18, 19-year-old and you're graduating high school or something like that, and they want to know, they don't really know what they want to do, what direction. What would you tell them? I mean, for me, I might say, maybe develop a skill set, a set of skills, a stack of skills in a certain area. But this isn't me. This podcast is about you, Judge. What would you tell a young person how to go about, leading a good life and to become a person like you?
Well, I don't know that necessarily people should aspire to be like me. I don't consider myself a role model in that regard. I'll leave that up to to God and to other people to decide what kind of person I am. I just know that I want to aspire to be a good person. I hope that I have been. I'm not proud of everything I've done. When you ask that question, what pops into my mind immediately, Robert, is the fact that as an 84-year-old, the times that I grew up in, and being a believer that things change through the years, there's some basics that don't change, but life has become more complex in my view. So I kind of feel sorry for the youth of today, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds right now, because there's so much to choose from. When I grew up, if we had a telephone at home, it was one color, black,
right,
and it weighed a ton. And
it was a landline.
And we had a radio, it was just a landline, and then it was a radio. We didn't have the choices that youth have today.
Yes.
And that includes education. That includes the universities.
That is so true.
What is available to them. And the other thing is what is available to them in by way of vocation, of what it is that they want to do in life. So I don't blame children today out of high school not knowing what they want to do for the rest of their lives. So and I feel fortunate that I grew up in the day of when, well, there was no TV when I was in high school, but it started right after I started my senior year of high school, and Perry Mason was on TV, and you had those shows that you say, oh, I want to be an attorney. You would see those shows and say, I want to be like Perry Mason. And those are the things that would get you to think about going into the legal profession. So I feel myself fortunate that when I graduated from high school, my thoughts, even though I went on to major in mathematics, and the reason there's a story behind that.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Well, I excelled in sciences, physics, chemistry, mathematics, all the sciences. Those were my best grades in high school.
Those are the topics I run and hide from, but we'll go on.
There are a lot of people.
I like statistics.
Where some people stayed away from that.
Yeah.
I devoured it.
That's awesome.
I couldn't take enough math courses.
Wow.
So when I went on to college, there was no question in my mind that I wanted to major in mathematics. And I said, well, what would I do as a mathematician? Well, maybe teach, I don't know. But that wasn't what I wanted to be, even though I majored in mathematics. I wanted to major in mathematics. The School of Mathematics at New Mexico State was in the College of Arts and Sciences. Because of that, you got a liberal education,
right,
in the liberal arts.
Right.
And you took a lot of basic courses in arts and sciences. So I knew that it was something to qualify me for law school. And at that time, especially even today, law schools do not want students to come into law schools having taken law courses in college.
No.
They do that
exactly.
They do that in law school.
Pre-law as a major, I don't recommend.
Right. And so therefore, now when I was a junior, people would say, you want to go to law school and you're majoring in mathematics? You're doing the wrong thing. And I went to a professor who happened to have a law degree, but he taught history. And Ira Clark, a fine professor at the university. And I went to him, I told him, I said, I've got a dilemma. I'm thinking people are questioning my education, that I'm not getting the proper type of degree. And he smiled at me, he says, no, he says, you continue on. You're getting a liberal arts education, mathematics. And what I found in law school, it helped my legal analysis.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I dabbled in not applied mathematics, but theoretical mathematics, like set theory and Boolean algebra and that type of math, which throws fear in the minds of people like you.
Yeah.
But that I devoured, as I said. So anyway, it helped me, and I'm glad that I majored in mathematics. And so getting back to your question, I haven't forgotten that question. I would say, I know it's tough, but if you don't know what to do, at least you can. I would not put off, I would get a university degree. There are some people, for example, that would want to go into some trade. For those people, I would say, well, you don't necessarily have to get a bachelor's degree. Go to some community college, get You want to be a welder? Go to welding school.
Right.
Some trade. You want to be a
But
carpenter?
get some type of
But get some type
certification.
of certification, yes. You need that.
Yes.
Because without that type of experience or background, you're going to have a hard time showing people or proving to people
Right.
that you're capable
Right.
of a certain trade.
Exactly.
So you need to have the education. You need to learn how to communicate. I think it's important for people not only to learn how to read and read well and read good books, but how to write.
Yes.
And communicating, that'll help. That skill will help them. So
I totally agree with that.
I would encourage that type of training,
Yes.
that type of education, and I would encourage that they do that, no matter if they still haven't decided what they want to do in life,
Right.
because you're going to need it, no matter what you decide you're
Right.
going to do. So that's what's important. That's a type of. And I would say, don't worry about not. Start school. A lot of universities, you don't have to declare a major till your junior year.
Right. Well,
Or-
Judge, in my case, I didn't decide to become or to go to law school until I was a senior. And I'll tell you a funny story. You know my dad. You knew my dad.
Yes.
He's passed. But I talked to one of the brothers at, I won't mention any names, at St. Edward's University where I went to college. And I told him, I said, I'm thinking about going to law school. And he was an older brother. And he says, is your dad a lawyer? And I said, no. He goes, forget it. He says, forget it. You'll never make it. And so I told my dad that. And my dad says, that is, let me just clean up the language. But he said that was nonsense.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that.
But did you ever run across people saying things like that to you?
No, that I don't know where that came from. It's hard for me to believe that he would have said that.
Yeah, he said that.
I don't know what his background was, but obviously he wasn't a lawyer.
No, he wasn't. But
But
he certainly made it sound like it had to be a
that certainly is not the criteria to determine whether or not you should go into law school. So.
right.
But in any event, I don't know how much time we've got, but
We're doing great.
are we? Okay,
But
good.
but the thing is, Judge, one last thing I wanted to say is that when people are looking to you for inspiration, can they contact you if somebody wanted a little bit of advice about
certainly.
life?
I've never turned down. When I was in law practice, if somebody was interested in going to law school and they called me up, I'd never turn them down. I would make room for them then. If they were in law school and they wanted to talk to an attorney to ask certain questions about law practice and things of that sort, I've never turned down anybody. And in this office that we're sitting at right now, several law students who applied to Georgetown Law Center sat here with me being interviewed by me because for about 3 or 4 years I represented the law center in interviewing admittees to the law school.
Oh wow!
In other words, so the student wouldn't have to go to interview in D.C. where the school is.
Right.
They would go to people like me, and then I would submit a report and indicate whether or not I recommended that they be admitted or not. So I always did that, and to this day, I've never turned anybody down.
Okay.
Either to talk to them on the phone or talk to them in person.
And you're still a practicing attorney, and do you do mediation, or what is your main focus right now?
My law license in New Mexico now, a few years ago, I deactivated it, so it's not an active status. But my license in Texas is still active.
Okay.
I still have to take continuing legal education courses. I have to take so many hours a year, and I'm still an active attorney.
Okay.
But I'm not practicing law. I would do mediation or arbitration.
Okay.
But it doesn't keep me from talking to people that call me who want me to refer them to an attorney.
Okay.
But I tell people that I'm not practicing law now. I'm devoting my time to my family, to my grandchildren, to my writing.
And your mediation and arbitration.
And mediation and arbitration is the only law that I do.
Okay,
right now.
but how do people sometimes I forget, but I don't want to forget. How would somebody contact you if they wanted to talk to you about mediation, arbitration?
Well, first of all, I'm listed in the phone book, whatever there is with phone books. I've never used one for a long time now, but but I'm on the internet. I have a website. My website has all my contact information.
Right, RudyApodaca.com.
RudyApodaca.com. It's got my email address. It's
Okay.
got my mobile phone. I no longer have a landline.
Okay.
And I might have to change my website because of that, because 2 months ago we did away with a landline.
Right.
So now it's on my mobile phone. But
Right.
it's listed on my website. So that people can learn about me on that. And if they don't want to learn more about my family and about my background and my career, they can go to Everypedia, which is a link
Okay.
on the first page of my website.
Okay. Now, Judge, I see some books next to you. What are these books?
I would like to discuss my 4 novels that I've written. These books here that you asked me to get together are the 4 novels that I've written in my life. Aside from the commentaries and the essays that I've written on the law and on other topics. We start off with the Waxen Image, which was published in 1977 by a small press in Mesilla, New Mexico. The Waxen Image. It's a suspense novel. It's a suspense thriller that takes a person from San Francisco into New Mexico in search of his daughter, who's missing. That was written back in 77. The next book
is like a suspense.
It's a suspense thriller.
Suspense thriller,
yeah.
Okay.
It's a mystery. And the next one is Pursuit, which is a novel that I wrote back in 2003, 2002, around then. There was quite a bit of span of time between the Waxen Image and Pursuit. But after Pursuit, they all came in tens. It seemed like I wrote Pursuit in 2003, I wrote A Rare Thing in 2012, and I wrote When the Angels Came in 2023. So
they can't be easy to do, though.
So it's 10 years apart. 10 years apart. No, well, it depends on the individual. But see, all writing is difficult. It's not easy.
Right.
I've run into people that say, "I wish I could be a novelist. I wish I could be a writer, like Rudy Apodaca or Stephen King or somebody." And say, well, they can be. The question is, how good of a writer, how good of a novelist. And you have to work hard at it. So nobody writes a book on the first draft. In fact, I've heard professors of literature and creative writing say novels and books are not written. They either say they're edited or they're revised. And I would say they're revised. They're edited too, but they're revised because the revisions that I went through for each of these books is monumental. In other words, you never stop writing. And of course, once it's published, it's out there for the people to write the writing that you wrote. Right. But you can't go back. Well, you can with later editions, I suppose. But it's like you take an artist that paints, a Van Gogh or any other artist that paints, and he's painted a piece, a masterpiece, or just a piece, and it's been sold, and it's out there, and maybe it ends up in a museum. You never find that artist going to that museum with his paints and refinishing it.
No.
You say, well, it's not finished.
You have to call it quits at some point.
You have to call it quits at some point, and you do that with novels too. But
so
in any event,
Pursuit, tell me a little bit more about Pursuit, Judge.
Well, Pursuit, it has a double meaning. It's about a lawyer in Albuquerque, in New Mexico. All of my novels are set in New Mexico.
Awesome.
And Pursuit is set mostly in Albuquerque. It's got some scenes in Santa Fe, and it's got some scenes in Greece and in other areas, other places in the country, Paris, France. But for the most part, it's set in New Mexico. And it's about an attorney, John Garcia, who practices law there. And he's at a state in his life, he's got 2 children and a wife, where he works for a big law firm in Albuquerque, and he's mostly a corporate lawyer. And he feels that something's missing from his life. And at the beginning of the novel, and he's searching for something because he's missing something. And he undergoes, at the time, he agrees to represent a young Hispanic man who's charged with attempted murder of the mayor the daughter of the mayor of Albuquerque.
Oh, he was court appointed.
No, he wasn't. He just represented pro bono. In other words, the family went to see him because he had represented the father in a workers' comp case.
Oh, okay.
And the father and mother went to see him and said, "My son needs help." needs a criminal attorney. He said, well, I don't handle criminal cases anymore. The public defender that was appointed to your son, he could probably do a better job than I could. We want you. We trust you. Anyway, he doesn't let him down, and he finally agrees to represent that boy.
How interesting.
In representing that boy, he starts learning something about himself and about what he's missing in law practice. And he feels that he's lost track of his own people, the Hispanics, and now he's got corporate clients.
Right.
And he doesn't represent flesh and blood people.
Right.
And he feels like that's what's missing. But in addition to that, from the very first page, you realize that somebody's following this lawyer. And eventually you find out that it has to do with his tour in Vietnam.
Oh.
And
you mean in a bad way they're following him?
Yes.
I don't want you to give up the whole book.
I don't want to give up who's following him.
Well, no, okay.
But
it wasn't necessarily a good follower.
Let's put it this way. His life is being threatened.
Okay.
So he's being pursued by people unknown.
Oh, wow.
Okay? So the title Pursuit has a double meaning. Pursuit has reference to the fact that he is somebody that's being pursued, and that's the mystery.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing is he's trying to pursue something else in his...
I see.
And by the way, he goes on in the senator, the U.S. senator who's used to be in high school, played high school football with him, wants to nominate him to a federal judgeship. So he wants him to think about that. And John Garcia was quarterback, and this U.S. senator was his best receiver. So they know each other very well.
Oh, okay.
So you know that the appointment will be made. But anyway, the point is that's what that book's about. A Rare Thing is a coming-of-age story. Yeah, actually, I wrote that story way before Pursuit and way before the Waxen Image. But I set the manuscript aside, and I picked it up after I wrote Pursuit and published Pursuit, and I finished A Rare Thing. And that's a coming-of-age story about a young boy growing up in a fictional town of San Carlos, New Mexico, which is actually Las Cruces back in the 50s and 60s.
By a different name.
By a different name.
Okay.
But people would know that. And people ask me, for example, well, are your stories autobiographical? And I tell them, technically, no, they're not. But then I add a proviso. I say, but most writers I know, and I'm no different, write about the things they know about, and so the characters they create are based on people, real life people that they knew, even though they're fictional.
Right.
So A Rare Thing. It's a coming of age story. Is it about my life? No. The young boy in A Rare Thing loses his mother when he's 6 years of age. My mother lived to be 95. I didn't lose her until much later in my life. The boy's father also dies somewhere in the novel. But does it have something in common with me in my life? The boy's father in A Rare Thing is an alcoholic. My father in real life was an alcoholic. So I know something about alcoholism. And now, was my father a bad person because he was an alcoholic? The answer is no. Why? Because most alcoholics I know are good people, to be honest with you. Right. They just have a disease.
Right.
And in any event, so this boy's father, so the fact that when this boy goes out searching for his father in bars, he's doing something that I did in my life.
Right.
I loved my father dearly.
Right.
I mean, that's the reason I went out for him. But anyway, my father finally handled that
Judge,
problem.
I respect you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I think people can learn from these type of things.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, no successful person in life, and I don't know, I'll leave it up to people to know how successful a life I led, but everyone has encountered these type of problems in one way or the other.
Yes.
And of course, then we come to, after the coming of age story of the boy in A Rare Thing, the latest one is When the Angels Came, and a lot of people say, "Gee, was that based on your life?" Or these people, they seem to come alive. No, they're all fictional. The Old Man and When the Angels Came is 80,
Also based in New Mexico.
Yes, it's the setting of that book, for the most part, is San Miguel, New Mexico. That's where it takes place.
Nice.
And San Miguel is a little village of about 1,100 people, south, about 5-6 miles south of Las Cruces. When I practiced law in Las Cruces, a lot of my clients were from
Yes,
San Miguel.
I'm very familiar.
La Mesa in that area, and farm country. And so
Chopis.
I know these
But we
people.
won't mention Chopis. I'm not sure it's even open.
I mentioned Chopis and when.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and when
In the
the
book,
angels came.
Chopis for the audience
When the angel came.
Is it still open, Judge?
Yes, it still is.
Okay, Chopis is probably one of the greatest restaurants,
Mexican food
restaurants in the world, and
it's in La Mesa, New Mexico.
Yes, it's a small restaurant, and oh my gosh, I wish I was there right now. But anyway,
Well,
I divert.
I say When the Angels Came. I think it's in the. It's written by the 12-year-old boy when he gets to be a graduate student at New Mexico State at age 22.
Okay.
And when he writes a journal and he says, I'm going to tell you a story about this old man that I met when I first moved with my parents when I was 12 years old to San Miguel, New Mexico, a little place I never knew. I said, San Miguel's very tiny. It's just a little village of 1,100, unincorporated village, 1,100 people. And I said, you might tell a tourist that on his way to Chopis to eat at the Mexican cuisine, he better not blink when he passes San Miguel because he'll miss it.
Yeah,
that's
it's
true.
true.
That's how tiny it is. Anyway, so I do mention Chopis there in that regard. But,
that is funny.
But
and they got the best chili rellenos on the planet. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's another. I have no interest in Chopis, any financial interest, other than I wish I was there right now.
yeah.
You probably do too.
It's named after Chope Benavides, who was the owner.
Yes.
He's now passed on. But right now, I've got a senior moment. I can't remember his real name, but Chope is just a nickname. But it's based on his real name. And I would think about it when we finish the interview. I'll remember what his real name was.
What I loved about it is it's a little restaurant and the best chili rellenos. But right behind it, they're growing the chili. They're literally growing the chili, then that's how fresh it is.
That's right.
But anyway.
So that's what When the Angels Came is a double coming of age story, because even though it's about the relationship between this 12-year-old boy when he moves into town and this 83-year-old man that lives there, the book actually, even though it starts with the journal entry of the boy, he starts writing about the man, and the first chapter starts when the old 83-year-old man is 6 years of age.
Oh, okay.
And he lives in Socorro, New Mexico, which is not right close. Socorro, Texas, close to El Paso.
Oh, okay.
And that's where he's from, and that's where he grows up. And he loses his parents at age 6, and his uncle raises him through high school. And then he goes on to the Marine Corps. You're talking about not knowing what to do. His uncle suggested he go to, at that time, Texas Western College, which is now University of Texas at El Paso.
Right.
But he decided at college at that time he wasn't sure what he wanted to do. So he decides he wants to get the military out of and avoid the draft. So he enters the Marine Corps for 3 years. That's what he does. He's actually sent to Korea because the Korean War breaks out right about 3 months after he goes into the Marine Corps. And his tour is extended from 3 years to 4 years, and he goes to Korea and fights there. And as a result, he is awarded the Silver Star. And his uncle, meanwhile, has died and left a little place, a little home in San Miguel, New Mexico. And that's why he ends up there. He goes to San Miguel because his uncle, he inherited this house from his uncle.
Nice.
And he happens to turn out to be a welder. His uncle was a welder, and he turns out to be a welder. He gets a job at White Sands as a welder, and he does that
which is White Sands Missile Range.
White Sands Missile Range.
It's a military base near Las Cruces, New Mexico. It's called White Sands because it has, I think, 40 square miles of white sand. It's a
gypsum.
Gypsum. And it's a natural and beautiful phenomenon.
Right, and in any event, So he works there like most of those people there. And I describe in there the fact that the military had buses that would pick up the workers that went to White Sands at the time. It was a military base, but they had a lot of civilian employees.
Right.
And the Las Cruces community and the El Paso community and the Alamogordo community relied on the employment, not only at Fort Bliss, but at White Sands for a lot of civilians that worked there, civil service. And Don Santiago is one of them. Santiago Dominguez, the 83-year-old, is one of them. So anyway, the book is about the relationship that develops between the old man and the boy. And the boy, when he meets his friends in San Miguel, they tell him to stay away from this old man because they call him the hermit, because he's a recluse. And they say, stay away from him. And instead of he's intrigued by the man, and he happens to bump into him accidentally at the town's only grocery store, and he helps carry his groceries to his home, and they develop a friendship.
Oh, okay.
And a very close friendship. Meanwhile, all these things happen to the little boy, Jamie Almaguer is his name, happened to him, and including a serious illness of his mother. And so he relies on this old man a lot as a mentor. So this old man becomes a mentor for the few months that he lives in the town with him. And so that's what the book is about.
That is awesome. Now, Judge, you and my dad were very good friends.
We were close friends.
I wish I could have interviewed him, but I couldn't. So, do you have anything that you can like sum up any stories or anything you remember about my dad?
Well,
keep it clean, Judge.
No, keep it clean. It's hard to when one talks about your dad, but I consider your dad a very exceptional and individual. He really was one of a kind, and
Jim Ikard. Yeah.
Yes, Jim Ikard. I had a great deal of respect for Jim, your father, and you know that. And
he was 10 years old, or
yeah, he was a good 10 years older than I was. He was about my brother Raymond's age.
Right.
In my family, Juliet was the oldest. She was one of my sisters. Then Raymond. Then came Jerry 5 years after Raymond.
Right.
And then came me 5 years, and then Priscilla about 2.5 years later. So I was 5 years younger than my brother Jerry, the one who became governor. Right. And I was 10 years younger than Raymond.
Right.
Who was 5 years older than Jerry.
But my dad
your dad was about Raymond's age.
And he had an electrical engineering background.
Yes.
And so maybe you all kind of related in that.
Yes. And he had a lot of energy, your dad did. And I admired him for that. And I relied on him for a lot of advice too. Although I did some legal work for him.
Oh, yes.
For his brother John, your uncle John.
Right, yes.
I did legal work for him and for Mr. Ikard, your grandfather.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah, I did legal work for him. I recall that Jim and John, they would not take care of things dealing with their father that he needed. And I remember that your grandfather owned a liquor license in a bar in Anthony, New Mexico. And he wanted to sell that license or lease it to somebody else at the time, and wanted to have to enter into a lease agreement to get that license to this other person. And your grandfather would come into Ikard Furniture, his place of business,
right,
and tell him, I need to see an attorney. He says, I'll get one for you, Dad. I'll get one. Well, it never happened. Finally, Jerry Gibson, who used to work for John Ikard, Jerry Gibson got Mr. Ikard and said, look, let me take you to an attorney. And he shows up in my office and said, he needs a contract, Rudy. Would you help him? And I did.
Oh, great.
And that was the first.
That's how
the first client. The first client I had was your grandfather.
Oh, wow!
Not the first client I had, but first client in your family was.
That I did not know that.
And that's how it turned out that I represented John and Jim, and then of course they became instrumental with opening the Citizens Bank. I eventually became attorney for the Citizens Bank, mostly because of, at that time John was not on the board, but Jim was, your dad, and he's the one that was instrumental in getting me on the board. because he had a lot of faith in me, and I appreciated that.
Well, I remember seeing you all together, and I mean the connection and the connection you all had was just amazing.
We had lunch together, and the board as a group.
He admired you, Judge. Let me tell you. I mean, if we'd see you at a restaurant, he'd say, "Oh my gosh, there's Rudy Apodaca," and he'd go on and on. He says, "Do you all realize he's not only a lawyer, but he has a mathematics degree?" And he was so impressed with you.
Well,
Judge.
I know he got impressed with all that. He used to embarrass me when. No, because of that. And the one thing, I'm going to say this, I never tell people this, but I became a member of Mensa back in...
Tell people what that means.
Well, no, Mensa, it's the highest 2% percentile intelligent people in the world. The highest 2%. But then I tell my fellow Mensans, I said, well, my IQ is such that I'm in the 1%. So I'm smarter than half of the Mensa members. So I like to tell that joke. It's not a joke, but it's but anyway, what I was going to say about your dad is he found out I was a member of Mensa, and he shouted to the board, and he couldn't. So he says, "I've never known a person at Mensa, and so that died down after a while, But
he used to give you a hard time about that.
When you said that he used to say the fact that it was major in mathematics and the fact...
No, but he really was. Truly, he admired you.
Yeah, I know he did. I appreciated that very much. And I had a real good visit with your dad before he died when we knew that he had cancer. And I went to his home and we had a visit. He knew it was probably the last time that I would see him. But that's what I mean about life, that it's important to remember the people that are good people in your life. Yes. And your dad was one of them. And your mother. I mean, Gloria, I think the world of Gloria.
And thank the Lord she's still with us.
And she's still with you. And that's amazing that she's still there. And so I admired both your parents. And I knew her.
She was the personality.
She was a good person. She was a very good person. And I remember meeting her mother for the first time, who at that time I think was living in El Paso.
Yes, Clara.
Clara.
Clara Geary.
But yes, I have fond memories of those times.
Yes.
But anyway, so I think I don't know. We've talked about the books.
I want to know, how do people buy these books? How do they get a hold of them?
Well, they're all available. All 4 books are available. In fact, also Kindle or Nook book. At BarnesandNoble.com or at Amazon.com.
Okay.
They can order them in any bookstore.
They're on Amazon?
They're not. You don't find them in the bookshelf of every bookstore because they're not published by a well-known publisher. But, they're not a bestseller. But people can actually buy them. They can call a bookstore and order it online or order it on the phone.
So I'm going to just say, excuse me for interrupting, Judge, the Waxen Image, Pursuit, a novel, a rare thing, and When the Angels Came.
Those are the titles of 4.
Yes, by Rudy Apodaca.
And they can find all that information on my website, rudyapodaca.com.
Yes.
Or they can just go to Amazon.com and read about it. I'm very fortunate that several readers, some who know me, and some who I asked, look, you enjoy my book? Write a good comment, favorable comment on it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Right.
And they did. So people can go there and see what other readers think about the books and make up their own mind whether they want to buy it or not. But it is out on Kindle. A lot of people do like the Kindle. I myself like to read and smell the smell of a good real book.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
But I do read.
I have a hard time. I've tried reading them on a iPad,
electronic,
and it's just not the same. I don't know why,
but that's really what I'm. And actually, at my age, I'm not doing much marketing, so that I really appreciate the fact that when you asked me whether I would agree to be interviewed, I said, well, there's nothing else I can promote my books.
Oh yes,
there.
And I know it's a real estate podcast, so the thing is, Judge, it's a real estate podcast, but we can take diversions.
Well, I think actually people that dabble in real estate and want to listen to your podcast for the most part for real estate information, they need a broader scope, a broader education than that. so it's not going to hurt them to learn.
No.
About,
And you were a real estate broker.
About humanness and stuff like that. Yes, I was.
Well, tell us just a little bit about that.
Actually, when I was when I entered law practice, a lot has changed in the legal field. And one of the things that's changed, specialization is something that was not existing back then.
Right.
Most attorneys were in general practice. They handled every conceivable case.
Even when I did it.
Even when you started, it was just general practice. You handled probate, you handled
everything.
Real estate,
Criminal,
divorce, criminal.
I did everything.
Personal injury cases,
Yes.
things of that sort. In other words, you handle all kinds of things. But the ugly head of, I would say ugly head, but specialization came aboard. So lawyers now specialize.
Right.
So people say, I'd like for you to do this real estate contract. They say, I don't handle real estate contracts. I handle just probate.
Right.
Or I just handle
exactly.
domestic relations.
Yeah.
So that happens nowadays. But back then I was in general practice. But so I handled every conceivable kind of case. You mentioned it, I handled it.
Right.
Workers' comp, criminal case, probate, real estate contracts,
Banking,
commercial, all kinds of stuff. Personal injury, divorce. What happened is later on in my practice, when I was able to not have to take so many criminal cases, I started looking for possibly going into a different field. And I kind of got a little bogged down with law practice.
which can happen.
Got stressed
which
out.
can happen.
And I was looking for something else. And I said, well, maybe real estate development. Maybe I can become a real estate developer. So at that time, lawyers could become real estate brokers without having to go through the apprenticeship the first 3-4 years and become real estate brokers at the very beginning. They had to take the brokerage exam, but lawyers
pass it
and pass it, and which I had to do. But I did take a real estate course, and I was fortunate that I passed a real estate broker's exam, and so I became a broker. So I opened up a real estate office. And that was existing for about 2.5 years, and
I believe your wife Nancy helped you.
Nancy was my office manager, and she also became a salesperson.
Who's a wonderful person.
Yes, Nancy. I think she's a great gal.
Yes.
Anyway, the point, to get back to answer your question, that was my intent, to become a real estate developer. So I got into real estate. So I handled some real estate contracts, and we listed some homes. And I had, in addition to Nancy, I had about 4 other salespeople.
Okay.
But what happened in the interim during that time, a fellow ex-neighbor of mine, Bill Bivens, and also a lawyer in Las Cruces, became a member of the Court of Appeals.
Right.
And he called me and said, there's an opening that's coming aboard. I'd like for you to consider going for it. I think you'd be an excellent Court of Appeals judge. I said, well, I've never aspired to be a judge. I've helped others become judges, but I don't know, Bill. Well, think about it. So I started thinking about it, and I ended up running for that position. I had you're talking about Las Cruces being unknown to people up north.
Right.
I had to run against 2 Albuquerque attorneys.
Oh, wow.
In the Democratic Democratic primary, and one of them, the other fellow, filed suit against him, said he didn't get enough signatures to get on the ballot, and he succeeded, so the other guy bowed out. When he bowed out, I became first on the ballot.
Oh.
And the Albuquerque attorney was second. So
wait, is it because your last name starts with A?
No. It's because we drew for positions.
Oh, I see.
And there were first, second, and third positions.
Okay.
And the other Albuquerque attorney was third in the position, and I was second. When he bumped out that guy on the first position, I became the first one on the ballot. They changed the law later, where they rotated the people on top of the ballot.
Oh, okay.
But I was fortunate I was top on the ballot, so I had that advantage over my opponent from Albuquerque. I ended up getting 55% of the vote in the primary. So now that's 10% spread, 55 to 45%. That's a big win.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big win.
That's amazing.
Especially in a judicial race. So, and then I didn't have a Republican opponent in the general.
Okay.
Well, I did, but he was a write-in ballot, write-in candidate. But so I was on the court Well, it was an 8-year term at the time, and so I got on board, and of course they changed the laws, so I didn't have to run for election. I was just on the ballot, and they had to say yes or no. They agreed with keeping me on, and so I was retained. So I was on the court for almost 14 years, and after that, as you mentioned, I did mediation arbitration work. So
Right.
that's how I became a real estate broker. But the end of it was because I became a judge.
Okay. Well, that's quite a diversion. Judge, thank you very much for this interview. And
How long have you been talking to me? Anyway?
Oh, it's been a little bit. But and thank you for the introduction to your books, Judge, and your life and your philosophy a little bit.
I hope it's been interesting.
It has been.
I hope we haven't bored your viewers. But,
yes. Well, thank you very much, Judge.
Thank you, Robert, for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thanks for all you've done for myself and my family.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you.